Okay, I already promised this morning that we would zoom in and out of the picture of mobility, and that's what we do now. We change the subject a little. With us on stage today is Jakob Steen Christensen from Denmark, from Copenhavn. Is that kind of right? Copenhagen. It's a pleasure to have you here. Yes, that's your applause, of course. Jakob is partner at JAJA Architects. Is that a little Danish?
Perfect.
JAJA, okay. JAJA Architects, and his topic is street as a resource. We're curious to hear about all your news. Your stage.
Thank you.
Jakob Steen Christensen. There we go.
It's okay,
Please.
it's okay.
Nein, noch einmal einen Applaus, bitte. So, Jakob.
Thank you for having me, and I have a lot I was going through my slides, so I need to just get right into it. But as a background, I'm an architect and urban planner, but we also try to lean into the field of mobility because the way we organize our streets and mobility has huge implications on how we experience our city and the urban life. So that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about today. We do a lot of things, but we, as I said, also work within mobility. And when we as architects and urban planners talk about mobility, we often start with the food pyramid, because once we start talking about parking or stuff that is very kind of close to your individual freedom, the temperature often rises quickly. So it's good to talk about the food pyramid, which is great because it just says you can eat everything, but for your own well-being, it's good to eat most from the bottom, a little bit on the top, but you can also, of course, also eat other things. So it's not a black and white thing. And the same goes for the mobility, that for our society, for your health, and for the economy, it's actually good if we walk and bike a lot. And if that option doesn't work, of course, you can use the public transport. And once in a while, you can also take your car, your private jet, or whatever. But it's just important that society as a whole prioritize most of the stuff in the bottom. So how does a mobility pyramid look in praxis or in reality? So this is a street, a typical kind of housing street in Copenhagen. And if we were to be in the food analogy, you can see this is lazy transportation. So it's burgers, pizzas, and fries. And again, it's not either or. So here we have taken the entire street, which was 100% private parking. We divided it in 3 pieces. One piece is actually normal cars, 1/3 is shared mobility, and 1/3 is kind of playgrounds and also kind of space to hang out. And this was actually a vision that we did because the politicians in Copenhagen said they wanted to get rid of 1/3 of all private parking, and we thought it was a great idea, and we wanted to show how that could look. Another thing, and in Copenhagen, it's quite fascinating. If you look at how we have organized the space in between our building, we use 66% of all the space for private cars. And of course, we have the rest, as you can see. But on the other hand, if you actually compare, this is how Copenhageners are commuting on a daily basis. You can see we only have 32% using car, and more or less 70% using all the other things. So in one way, we think there's it's not a relationship between how people are moving and how we have laid out our street. So this is in Danish, but I will just explain that we have tried to talk about it as a democratic kind of, it's a democratic street profile. So basically, if we have 66% of all the space in between our building are used for cars, that would be that representation in the parliament. And if 70% were using public transport, walking and biking, we would have a majority to change our physical space. So in one way, we think it's interesting to see how we allocate our public space, which is something that belongs to everyone, to also make it political and try and make those connections. So basically, to make it short, we are basically trying to say to people and educate them that we need to be much more ambitious on behalf of our public space. And that's why we do a lot of street transformation projects that are basically improving quality of life in Copenhagen. We also think that it's really good if we can also use more active spaces in the city. So in one way, what we are also trying to teach is a methodology. So what we call backcasting. And the thing is that we start from the starting point of today, and instead of, as we have done in mobility planning, is that we will look at how was mobility the last 10 years, and we try to forecast that. We basically try to jump into the future and say, what is the dream scenario? How do we want to live? And then we work our way backwards in order to get to the goal. When we do really long-term planning, we also need to kind of learn gradually. There's a lot of technological improvements and a lot of knowledge constantly being produced. So we're also trying to say that we need to do prototyping. We need to make pilots, so we continuously learn. And so the methodology is a little bit inspired by the yin-yang. So it's a long-term thing, but with a constant piloting in order to learn from what's going on every day. I'm a little bit unsure if I'm going to get through this, but what I wanted to show to you guys was the pyramid of change. And again, a little bit with the pyramid, what is really important is that we try to first reduce basically the trips that we don't want, and we move them over to active mobility. The other thing, so that's about behavioral change and basically just reducing. In the middle, we have the reuse. We have a lot of infrastructure already built out, but we need to use it in a better way. And lastly, we also need to build new things, but it should not be, we need to be much better at using what we have and then working more like with the acupuncture strategy to connect the points better. So if we start with the reduce, it's more like a behavioral change project, and it's when Copenhagen got the new metro system, which was a huge public investment, and then somehow in relation to that we were planning a pilot project to show people what this big public investment could actually mean to you. So a big part of the behavioral work we do is basically, and that's also where we as architects can come into play, is that if people are going to change their modes of habit to place the car and walk and bike and take the public transport, we really need to show them how good our cities can be if you do the change. So we have planned a pilot project in a big area in Copenhagen, where it's a little bit, it's a clean housing street. It's only housing, but when you open the door, this is what you meet. And so what we have done here is that we are trying to plan for a 1 year where residents in this street are taking out around 70% of their parkings to see and experiment how would it be to live in that way. So the first thing is that here you see the existing street. We made it into a one-directional street, and since the main focus of this street was not a road, we could make some small swings also to decrease the speed. We made some drop-off zones. We made space for gardens on the sides, and we also made a green common area in the middle of the street. So in one way, we went from 100% parking to a kind of a temporary project for 1 year, of course, where it would be very different to live. And of course, this is how it looks today, and this is how it would be able to be in the future. And the point here is that through an experiment like that, we will also learn like a lot of problems. But the thing is that what is interesting, because we have seen a lot of parklets, we have seen a lot of places where you take 1 or 2 parking spots and you replace it for 3 months. But what we are seeking funding with the Danish municipality is to actually create like a 100-meter street where people can feel and live how it is to live in a space which is not dominated by a private car. So we think that's a really powerful tool for the change as well. And the thing is, with this strategy, we can start with very kind of isolated areas, and if it's a success, it can kind of grow. And of course, one day it could be a more car-free cities. So the point here is that we can act really small, but have humongous ambitions to make a big change. I'm going to rush to the reuse, since, as you can feel, I'm a naive architect and just coming with glossy pictures of how the future should be. We try to step up the knowledge by making a business PhD together with the university. And a part of that PhD study in car-free neighborhoods in Europe, we made a case study in Copenhagen. And the reason for that is that Copenhagen is known for being really, world known for its bike culture. And it is also really good to bike in Copenhagen. But the problem is that the last 10 years, we actually got an increase of 30% of private car ownership. So we are very good at telling the story of how good the bikes are, but we're actually going very in the wrong direction in terms of cars. So we made a study of how to make a traffic calm principle within the entire Copenhagen. And we've done a lot of lobbyism, and now it's actually a part of the political program for the biggest political party in Copenhagen. But just to give short, the first thing we did was that we looked at all the main infrastructure going into Copenhagen, and we have a lot of big roads, and they all go into the historic center. Then actually 2 years ago, the politicians decided to create, to have a car-free in the very, very center of the city. So basically, with that already given, we came up with the idea that maybe we can make a plan where everyone can access Copenhagen, but Copenhagen and the medieval city should not be a fast track, so that if you come from north, the fastest way was to drive through the city. It's very basic. A lot of cities in Europe has it. We have already here a ring road, so we need to make a system to kind of move the traffic around. So we took all the main arteries into the city, and we made them into 2 groups. The green ones, they are what we call the super boulevards, and they're only for bikes and public transport. So that actually makes it so that actually taking the right choice, walking, biking, and taking public transport is actually the fastest transportation. And that's the way to move people over. These areas here, they are access to the area where people are living, so you can get into the area, but you cannot drive through. If you want to go from this area to down here, you would need to use the ring road. Very inspired from Ghent in Belgium, we introduced the traffic zones. So we use the infrastructure, combine it with the traffic islands, they're called. And the reason why the traffic islands are really smart is that today a crossing or like a main street is fairly inefficient because it has a lot of crossings, both where cars are crossing, but also bikes and pedestrian and everything. So basically working with the super boulevards for only bikes and public transport, then we close a lot of the side streets. And since cars cannot move from that zone to that zone, we actually create really efficient corridors through the city. So this is one of the main streets in Copenhagen. It's named after H.C. Andersen. It's not like a fairy tale street at all. And we actually here, this is actually, we're taking it back to its origin. Another thing which is has had a big impact for when we talk about this project with the public is that we, of course, it's a traffic plan, but we also try to find synergies and other things. So today, all the streets, and this is the historical fortification, today all the streets are going in and driving through. And with this plan, you can drive into these areas, but you cannot drive through into this area. And so basically, we really try to seek synergies. And here, this is the historical fortification. And now we have the possibility to actually create a connected park in the entire city. And that would be the biggest green area connected in the entire Copenhagen. So that has also been a part of that. It started as a mobility project, but it's actually by reducing traffic and what else can we bring in that has been the success of the project. Zooming a little bit further into the neighborhood, today, and also in Hamburg and in Germany, most streets you can drive everywhere. Basically, big, small, all streets you can basically get to. So in the neighborhood scale, there's also big potential. And one of the things that we looked into in the neighborhood is to work with one-directional streets. This is our office is actually right here. This is our local neighborhood. So basically, what we suggested is that we have some main streets that. There's a bigger capacity, and then all the housing streets, we make them one-directional. And of course, in the old days, it would be very confusing to make a lot of streets one direction. But the people living in the neighborhood, they know their way around. And when people are visiting, they would sometimes need to use the GPS to make it quicker, but that is not a problem anymore. What is also fascinating as spatial designer is that, normally, the crosses, they are the ones that get biggest, also with traffic, because we have right and left turns. But if you work with one-directional streets, you actually have the possibility, so when the car is coming here, that can turn to the right, and the car on the other side can turn to the left. And in that way, you actually also, with working with one-directional streets, you can actually invert the entire crossing, so it's actually a meeting place for people rather than cars. So I don't know if I have the map now anyway, but you can get around the neighborhood and sometimes also work with these solutions. So of course, no streets are the same, and there's a lot of different solutions that you can work. So it's also a little bit about unfolding the creativity when it's a street meeting a main street, how we organize the parking, and of course how we can turn the crosses into plazas. The last point, and I will hurry, is we have a lot of mobility out there. So instead of trying to build a lot of and propose a lot of new stuff, we are working with acupuncture kind of strategies. And so it's kind of a hub strategy across all scales. And one of our most famous building internationally is actually this red parking house. As an architect, I wanted to be famous for operas and public buildings, but now it's parking houses. Anyway, but this is of course a big building in an urban context, and of course what they are able to do is to collect a lot of cars, and then in this area called Nordhavn, the North Harbor in Copenhagen, then all the neighborhood is car-free and packed in one area. And of course also in an urban environment, we need to make the facades attractive, and we also, here it was so dense, so we also proposed to create an activity and outdoor fitness center in the middle of Copenhagen. And the success of this place is actually that it's combining a playground with fitness, and all the parents always have guilty that they're not training enough. So here the kids and the parents can actually train together. So it's extremely popular. It's also very windy in Copenhagen, so we made wind benches. It's a new concept. The next thing is, of course, on the community is that we also we have the bus stops, we have the tram stops, we have all that thing. But of course, we've also been working for Voi and other kind of micro-mobility operators, from the bus stop, how we can extend the service for the last and first mile. And also make it a part of the community where the post box is and all these kind of basic things. In Copenhagen, we also proposed a swapping station. So it's next to the train station. You have the swapping station, and it's basically trying to weave the mobility into the everyday. So if you need a practical errand, you can also run it by this place and meet your neighbor as well. The last thing I thought was funny to show is that we work with a company for shared cars, targeting families. And as I said earlier today, when you open the door in most housing streets in Copenhagen, you're just met by oceans of cars. And what the idea was that when we place out shared cars in Copenhagen, there's not a spatial strategy. They are just placed random places where the municipality finds space for it, which is a real problem. So I think if we can be much better at kind of placing car sharing, micromobility, where it really makes sense, I think the product can also become much better. So again, in an urban context, what we tried to do was to place the shared cart together with a place where you can park your bike, a place where you can meet your neighbor, and also a place where there was like more greener qualities. So within the streets of Copenhagen, or an experiment along a street, we took out so we have 6 here, we took out 2 spots. And we always organized that the shared cars should be in front of the main door, because if we want people to use shared mobility, we also need to provide for the absolute best spots. So basically, if you are living in an apartment block, you open the door and it should be the preferred and best option right next to you. So basically here you see a traditional kind of 5-floor house with the main door. And when you come out, the first thing you should meet is like something green that resembles housing quality. It's a place where you can sit and you can chat to your neighbor. It's a place where you can park your bike. And there's also a democratic thing that everyone, the street is not only for cars, it's for everyone. So when you come with your cargo bike or whatever, or you come with your trolley with your kids, everyone should be able to cross here. Today it's really hard to get through when the cars are parked like this. Anyway, so we have the tree, we have the bench, we have the social infrastructure, we have the bike parking, and next to, then for each staircase, we have 2 shared cars. But the point is that the main door is a really good strategic point, because all the trips usually end and starts at the same place. And this is a good way to do it. Sometimes we can also integrate other things, so it's kind of a prototype that you could develop, but the main door is kind of the anchor function in order to organize it. And when you come down the streets, actually the trees would also tell you the number of the street, so it's kind of a new way to organize it, but also integrate living qualities into it, so it's not only about that. So of course, when you come out, this is what you should meet. You should meet a tree and something nice instead of cars. That was everything. I can feel in my mouth that I talked a lot.